Hello and welcome to Linguisticator. In a couple of recent videos, I showed the construction of a guided memory palace for all the parts and pieces of French grammar. We included portals from this main memory palace into separate memory palaces that will house the details of each part of French grammar. In this video, I'm going to take you through the process of building out a memory palace for the verbal system of French. Before we can get started building the space in virtual reality, we need to understand the structure of the verbal system. This is our map of French grammar. It contains all of the patterns, variations, and exceptions of the grammatical system of French. All of these tables along the bottom of the map, this large section mostly in green, and this block mostly in yellow down the right-hand side is all the verbal system. It is the largest and most complex part of the French language. The tables along the bottom comprise the regular and auxiliary system. This is the most important part to learn. In total, there are roughly 1,000 forms in this portion of the map, but you only need about 80 to 85 mnemonics in order to learn all of the details once we've got the memory palace set up. This is the part of the map that we'll be focusing on today. The other two sections are for verbal usage and for all of the irregular patterns. So, to start, we know we need to divide our memory palace into three different sections: an area for the regular and auxiliary system, an area for verbal usage, and an area for irregular verbs. Next, we need to look a little bit closer at the structure of the regular and auxiliary system. There are 11 conjugations in this portion of the map. Those in green are regular, and those in yellow are irregular. There are three main regular conjugations, and the formations of the reflexive and passive are also regular. That's 5 tables. We then have the two key auxiliary verbs, être and avoir, and 3 modal verbs, devoir, pouvoir, and vouloir. Finally, we have the verb aller, which means to go, and is also used as an auxiliary to form the periphrastic future. This means we will have to divide our space for this portion of the verbal system into 3 different zones: one for the key auxiliaries, one for the regular patterns, and one for the modals and aller. Let me show you what this kind of macro structure might look like. This memory palace is fully set up to hold the entire regular and auxiliary system. Each of these platforms represents a different conjugation. To mirror our map, we have kept the same color scheme, so those platforms in yellow are irregular, while those in green are regular. We have zones set up for être and avoir here at the front, and then we have a zone set up for the 3 main regular conjugations, as well as the reflexive and passive. In the back, we have areas for the modals and aller. I was planning on putting verbal usage in this blank area to the right, and all of the irregular verbs in this blank area to the left. Now, I've actually already tested out this memory palace fully. I'll put a link in the description below to a blog post on how I used this memory palace in a couple of week-long intensives at a school in Cambridge during the summer of 2018. Students as young as 10 were able to learn all the regular and auxiliary forms in just a few days, and a couple of students even did all of the modals as well. So it worked amazingly well, but I still want to build a new one from scratch here, because there were a few issues with the design that I need to correct. We'll be able to keep this kind of general layout, but we need to tighten up the space and also change the structure we use for each individual verb. Before I show what's wrong with this palace, it might help to have a better understanding of how the conjugation tables are structured in French. This table shows the regular ER conjugation, represented by the verb aimer, which means to like or love. In terms of what you need to learn, it's really all about the endings. The verbal endings tell you what mood, tense, person, and number each verb form is. All verbs in French are structured exactly the same. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail here. If you want to learn more, please sign up for our online course in French. I'll put a link in the description. Very briefly, we have 4 different moods: indicative, subjunctive, conditional, and imperative. We also have 9 finite forms. Within each mood, we have both simple and compound or perfect tenses. We have 4 distinctions of time: present, imperfect, preterite, and future. We have 2 distinctions of number: a singular and a plural. And finally, we have 3 distinctions of person: first, second, and third. With all of these distinctions, we need a way of keeping track of mood, time, aspect, number, and person. This is pretty complex, and instead of using mnemonics, we want to use spatial organization to help simplify things. Let me now show you how I did this before and what was wrong with it. This platform represents the ER conjugation we just looked at on our map. It mirrors the structure of the table pretty closely. This area is for the indicative, the subjunctive goes here, the conditional here, and the imperative here. Simple tenses go on these pedestals, and compound tenses on these. The 4 pairs of pedestals are for the 4 different tenses: present, imperfect, preterite, and future. The tall pedestals are for the singular, and the short pedestals are for the plural. Over each pedestal, we would then arrange our mnemonics in a triangle to represent the differences in person, first, second, and third. With this structure in place, we just need to create mnemonics for the actual endings. On its own, the structure looks very clean and minimalist, but it changes when we add our images. This is what the space looks like, filled in with mnemonics chosen by students in one of my classes. The space starts to feel a bit cluttered with the images. This isn't so much of an issue in VR mode, but it is in desktop mode. In VR, each of these objects is about 1 foot cubed, but in desktop mode, the images look small and cramped. Having built this in VR mode, I didn't expect that. Another issue, and again it's one that's more prevalent in the desktop mode, is that without depth perception, it can become difficult to separate mnemonics in front from those in back. This is particularly an issue when looking at the subjunctive, because you can see all of the mnemonics from the indicative in the background, and it becomes easy to confuse things. We ended up adding walls between the subjunctive in order to prevent this, but that didn't look great. Finally, there is quite a lot of space between conjugations in here. I did that in part so that they would feel really distinct, but it ends up giving an impression of scale that is excessive. In other words, it makes the verbal system feel larger and more difficult than it is. So this was a great first draft and one that is fully functional, but also one which we can improve on. Let me show you the new structure I've built to address the issues we've just discussed. This is the new spatial structure for a French conjugation. We have the indicative here on the left, and now each ending has its own pedestal. So we have first, second, and third person. We now only have one pedestal for the compound tenses, because the only thing you really need to know is whether the verb uses avoir or être as the auxiliary. Now, instead of using the same orientation for all 4 moods, we can actually just turn around and face the other direction. So this area here is for the subjunctive. We turn back the other way, and we have the conditional. Finally, we have an area for the imperative and the non-finite forms. With this structure now refined, I just need to duplicate it and arrange the rooms in a space like what we saw in the draft memory palace. We've now got the memory palace fully set up and refined for the regular and auxiliary verbal system of French. Later, we'll add verbal usage to this area back here and irregular verbs to this area over here. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos on language and memory. Please also check out the links in the description for information on our online courses in French and memory, as well as on our virtual reality software for building memory palaces.